And I don't think we can even fit all of our Jerry Lawler conversation into a single episode. I mean, how could you possibly talk about a career that spanned, from the 60s to now in a couple hours? But in 74, that's when something major happens. It's a big summer program where Lawler is going to challenge Jack Briscoe for the NWA World title. Now, I know these days, respectfully, the NWA is, well, not what it once was. But back then, I just want to remind everybody the WWE has not always been the juggernaut they are now. In 1974, the richest, most valuable prize in all of wrestling was the 10 pounds of gold that was owned and operated and manipulated by the man you're watching on YouTube right now at myworldpod.com, Mr. Jack Briscoe. And this is the richest prize of them all. This is the equivalent of being the Super Bowl MVP, of winning the World Series trophy, of cutting the net after the NBA finals or the NCAA tournament. I mean, this is the high grass here. And the Observer says this: the idea was Lawler would beat them all, but the reality was it didn't happen that way. Some of the big stars of the era wouldn't do jobs even out of their own territory, so Jarrett had to settle for DQ finishes. But they kept tape footage, and they were among the first, if not the first promotion to do music videos. Among those brought in were the Sheik, Bobo Brazil, Mr. Wrestling 2, Dick the Bruiser, Robert Fuller, Rufus Jones, and Jerry Briscoe. But we got close, but we never quite got the NWA title. Do you remember as a kid feeling like Lawler challenging for the title was a big deal? Was it a big deal to you? Was it a big deal to the fans of the territory? Like because he's been the top guy for a while, and it felt like with all that momentum, hey, they might go with it, and then they didn't. Talk to me about what you remember of that as a fan.
See, and I don't have any, and look, obviously I'm in school as a kid, and Nashville was a different market than Memphis. And when I was a little boy, Nick was running Nashville. And so my dad was not promoting Nashville till kind of the late 70s, I think is the time frame. But anyway, I don't have any fond memories or vivid memories of Lawler specifically in that. But, when my dad started explaining all the stories about all that and the understanding the chase and everything that went with it, I guess the long and the short of it during this era, the belt meant more than, and look, my dad loved the Briscoes and the Funks and Harley and, just the whole iterations of those 70s champions in so many ways. But the belt was the attraction. And so the chase for my dad, and whether it was Lawler and Ricky Gibson or Lawler and plug in a number of names, he would bring in those number one contenders. At one time, it was even Andre, but bringing in all those top names, and the winner would get a world title shot. My dad, they booked it to get Lawler to the, I guess you could say, the apex, and then something would be stolen out from under him. But yeah, so, there was a time when my dad pushed for Lawler to be the NWA champion, and I think Lawler wanted it, but at the end of the day, it wasn't in the cards, and I don't think either one of them was extremely disappointed because, again, Lawler gets to stay home, make a boatload of money. Did they really want it? Probably more for fame as opposed to fortune. And Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett were about money more than fame.
Let's talk a little bit about the match itself. We mentioned all the opponents that are going to come in the meantime. And I just want to make sure that's not lost, because this is how you build a challenger for the NWA title. He brings in the Sheik, one of the top drawing cards from the Detroit area, and Lawler gets the win. He brings in Bobo Brazil, same thing. He brings in Mr. Wrestling number 2, who'd been all over the place, but certainly Georgia Championship Wrestling and national television. He brings in Dick the Bruiser. He brings in Robert Fuller, Rufus Jones, and Jerry Briscoe. It's all to build to this world title match that happens on September 16th, 1974. And Briscoe's a natural babyface, and Lawler is one of the best heels in the business. But Memphis gets behind Lawler because he's their hometown guy. So even though he's the bad guy, he's our bad guy. And I just find that whole story fascinating. Meltzer would write the story. He says, In those days when Briscoe was champion, he had a very subtle trick, which was late in the match when the opponent, usually a babyface, would hit their finisher. He'd drape his foot on the rope. It seems like nothing, but it spoke to the aura Briscoe had at the time when he thought he was above that kind of thing. Briscoe had already done the same thing in Florida against a heel Dusty Rhodes. The idea was for Rhodes to eventually turn face, and the match that set it off was Rhodes hanging with Briscoe in a wrestling match for the title, dropping the elbow, and Briscoe just getting his foot on the rope. It was enough to get the fans of Florida to cheer Rhodes, who'd been a top heel for a few years. And if it worked with Rhodes, it was going to work even more with Lawler, since Briscoe had emotional ties with Florida fans, but no such ties in Memphis. So, guys, to recap here, Lawler hits his finish. Everyone is under the impression he's about to win the NWA World title. And by simply putting his foot on the rope, meaning I can't kick out, but I can do this, it got Lawler over. He became a babyface. It's just magical to me that we have beat up wrestling and dissected it and discussed it and digested it and regurgitated it. I mean, we've manipulated it every which way that we've got to have these ridiculous debates online. But back in the day, well, how'd you turn heel? Well, I hit my finish and then the guy put his foot on the rope. What? It's remarkable, is it not?
Yes, and that's what I was standing backstage Saturday at Triple Mania, and Conrad, watching on the big screens at the baseball stadium, and the people kept coming in Saturday night. I mean, second match, and you can literally see how they were coming in up at the very top over and over and over and over, and right now AAA Origins, but they're bringing, they're on one aspect, you could say, they're selling nostalgia in so many ways, old factions, talent that was super over years, but that was a big part of the show. And I go back to, it's all that emotional connection. People are coming out over 15,000 strong because they have that emotional connection with these characters. And so, yes, we've referenced Caitlin Clark here recently. I think she's the first female video game basketball player. You're watching, the guy's been doing it for a while. And look, in today's wrestling, the Ospreys of the world, Kenny Omega, they can do things that the 70s generation, the 80s generation, the 90s generation could never dream of. But the very simplistic storytelling, and I'm going to use this as an example, Briscoe putting his foot on the ropes just made, just the feel of it. In today's modern world, the kick out on one.
Yes.
You can put all the moves and everything into it, but the right timing with the right emotion, with the most simplistic, I'm not going to overthink this. Instead of kicking out on the traditional two, I'm going to do one. Everybody in that arena stood up, and that's how Briscoe and Lawler did. They told that story, and son of a gun, that dastardly Lawler heel, but he's our bad guy. Damn it, he should have won it. Oh man, I love the business because of this kind of stuff. I love it.